useful part for you. We're going to go through every single part of an actual Olympiad. We're going to talk about how to do it. Then we're going to demonstrate doing it. And then obviously we'll take all of your questions at the end. So that means we're going to go through the presentation part, the commentary part, the responses, and then also the judges' questions. Before we do, let me just introduce you to the other people who will be part of this. So I'm Archie Stapleton. I have a master's degree from Harvard in theological studies. I did like basically Buddhist philosophy and Sanskrit. I have an undergrad in philosophy from University of British Columbia, and I co-founded the Pan American Ethics Olympiad. Zach Bloom here, we went to undergrad together, actually. That's where we met, on the first day of undergrad, playing Frisbee with one another. And we've been friends and colleagues ever since. He has an undergrad also from UBC with an honors degree, and then a master's from UBC as well in, I think, like the philosophy of logic. Is that more or less right? Metaphysics and logic? Yeah, good. Yeah, he'll correct me later if I got it wrong at all. Oriana's going to be speaking with us as well. Her main claim to fame in terms of the Olympiad was the champion of the International Olympiad, and is a phenomenal Olympian, ethics Olympian, as we say, and has even helped me with the training of like hundreds of Australian students in the Australian Ethics Olympiad training. So a brilliant addition to the team. And Mars, who may not, oh, he is down there as well. Yeah, he is a graduate from Harvard Philosophy. There he is. And hello, Oriana. Hello, Mars. So he is a graduate from Harvard with a degree in philosophy. I believe he focused on contemporary political philosophy, ethics, and metaphysics, and he explored free will and rationality in his undergrad thesis. He's also a champion debater. It would take too long to go through all of his accomplishments there. Okay, with that in mind, let's launch straight into it. Let's talk about the match format and what an Olympiad really is. So, in an Olympiad, you have 2 teams of 3 to 5 students, literally at any age. So they could be grade 6 through 12. Obviously, tends to be in the sort of upper middle to high school range that we tend to get. Perhaps soon we'll split these into multiple competitions and we'll have a middle school competition if there's enough demand. But for now, you have 2 teams. And before you get to the competition, you'll have 8 ethical cases given to you in a document once you've registered for the competition. These cases are all about a page long. You're going to see an example of one of these in just a minute. You're going to read through all of these. You're going to look at the discussion questions. You're going to plan it all out with your team members. You're going to think about how you'd respond to various different types of questions on the topic. Then, when you get in on the day, you are going to be sent to a breakout room with another team and a judge, the judge moderator. You are going to then have a coin toss where the judge says, hey, pick heads or tails. One team calls it. If they win, they get to say whether they'd like to be team A or team B first. That just means whether they're going to be the presenting team first or the commenting team first. And there's no actual benefit to either side of this. It really doesn't matter which one you pick because you don't know what case you've got and you don't know what question you've got when you do this coin toss. And the rounds are perfectly symmetrical in that there's no benefit to being first or second at all. Okay. Then the coin toss happens. You know whether you're going to be team A or team B. If you're team A, what happens next is the judge clicks next on their presentation and the case comes up, one of these 8 cases. And they read the case and then they click next again and then a specific question pops up. And this is important. The question that comes up at that stage might not be one of the 3 discussion questions, okay? Especially if you're in like a finals round of an Olympiad. We've got a finals that I'll talk about in a second coming up in August. If you're in that, you can almost expect that the topics are going to be a little bit more difficult than the basic questions because you're in, a higher level round, okay? They can be really about anything. Obviously, they tend to be very related to the case, but they could be quite an abstract question that isn't directly related to the case, and you might have to make the connections to the case, all right? Or they might be really case specific. You just don't know. That's why you have to prepare in quite a broad way. Prepare quite a lot. Okay, then once you've got the specific question, judge reads it twice, then they start a timer for 3 minutes, and that's where you, in your team, team A, get to prepare their presentation. So you have 3 minutes preparation time, as you're going to see Oriana and I do a little later. These 3 minutes are quite difficult and intense. We'll talk about how to approach them later on in the presentation. After that, Team A then gives a 5-minute presentation. So we're over here. Team A, 5-minute presentation. That's going to answer the question, and we'll go through all the different components that it should have in a little bit. After that, team B gets 1 minute to confer with one another. Who's going to say what? You want to respond to this? You want to respond to that? And then they give a commentary to team A's presentation. And as we'll talk about later, that commentary does not have to be rebuttal at all. It almost shouldn't sound like you're attacking team A's presentation. We'll talk more about it. Then team A gets another minute to confer with one another, and then they respond to the commentary also in 3 minutes. Now we get to what I think is by far the coolest, most interesting, and probably the best, pedagogically speaking, part of the Olympiad. That is judges' questions. So our judge is going to be Mars today. And he, I presume, given who he's going to be asking questions to, isn't going to pull any punches. And when I'm a judge of an Olympiad, I don't pull any punches. What we do is treat you like academic philosophers, okay? And we ask you all the questions we would ask to genuine high-level PhD philosophers, all right? That's how we treat you, and that is such fun. We'll talk about how to get around the difficulty of that and why you shouldn't be nervous about it, why you should treat it as a great, like, fun part of the experience based on the way you're judged here. But don't be nervous. Be excited that you get to talk to, like, really high-level philosophers for 7 minutes about your case. Okay. Then the judge is going to write some notes. They're going to score each team based on how they performed there. And then you're going to repeat the process in reverse, where team A becomes team B, team B becomes team A. And importantly, you get a new case and a new question, and you go again. Cool? Okay, by the way, if at any point people have a question, I recommend you just chuck them into the chat, or there should be a question and an answer thing, and I should see them pop up as well. And perhaps I'll be notified if anyone has any questions. Okay, cool. Let's go straight on to the two different types of events, because they are slightly different in important ways, and it's worth understanding the differences between the two, okay? So structurally, they're identical. The format that I just told you about, that is true for both of these. It's the same format of competition. The differences are about other components that we'll talk about right now. So if you look at the Pan American Olympiad, Pan American Ethics Olympiad, this is actually like the sort of original type of Olympiad, and it started in Australia. And so the International Ethics Olympiad is held out of Australia. That international one has teams who qualify for it from Australia, New Zealand, China, Singapore, Korea, India, and now, well, like for a while now, North America as well. And I'll have you know, the North American teams who you'll be representing have won, I believe, 3 of the last 5 of these International Ethics Olympiads. So no pressure, but a little bit of pressure. You guys are the best of the best. So the way it works is this. We have an event coming up on May 17th, and actually the registration has been extended for that. So we were going to have the registration deadline tonight. We decided to extend it by 1 whole week. So if you still want to submit more teams or you need to get your registration in, you now have a week to do that. And if you place in the top few teams, we're actually not exact, it depends how many people register for how many teams we get to send to the international. But if you are in the top few teams there, you will qualify for the International Ethics Olympiad, which is the biggest ethics Olympiad on the planet, by the way. And that happens in July at like 6 p.m. EST. It's Australia time, so it'll go a little bit late into the night, but not too bad. Aside from that, you'll notice that the top 8 teams of the Pan American Ethics Olympiad also qualify for the other final, which is the TK Ethics Grand Final, which is in August 29th, 6 p.m. EST. Okay, and I'll explain what that is in just a second. But so if you do well at the upcoming Olympiad, you also qualify for the TK Ethics Grand Final. Okay, the topics for the Pan American are general, so they can be any kind of ethical question. They could be political philosophy. They could be, about religion. They could be about sectarianism. Really, anything at all is open, including technology. All right, and I've already talked about those dates. All right, so now what are the differences with the TKE? TKE, sort of like tech ethics is the way to think about that, is that it's focused specifically on technology and AI related questions, okay? So it's things about, as we'll see, like whether it's good to have relationships with robots, whether AI is likely to be a force for good in the world or not. What happens with property rights when you have AI machines like making art and these kind of things? There's so many interesting questions on the technical side of all of this. So that's the TK ethics. And the structure in terms of the year goes like this. There's a fall event, there's a spring event, and then there's a grand final in the summer. And you get into the grand final by doing well at the fall or the spring, and this year also by doing well in the Pan American Olympiad. All right, that will also get you access to this one. It'll be a whole different case set with a focus on technology. I should also clarify, going back to the Pan American for 1 second, that anyone is allowed to come to that event, absolutely anyone, but only school-based teams are able to qualify for the international final. And the difference is that with the TKE one, anyone is welcome, and you can get all the way through to the grand final and win the whole thing, even as a team made up of people from wherever in the world. Like, they don't have to be from the same school. Okay, I think that covers the key distinctions. You've got the dates on the screen. You can find all this information online. And yeah, we certainly hope you come to this upcoming Pan American Ethics Olympiad next month. Okay, anything to add there, Zach, or are we good to get on to the round?
I think we're good to go. I think you crushed it.
Brilliant. Okay, let's talk now. We actually do have a question in the chat. I think we might be able to take that. Perhaps Zoe can determine how we take that exactly. I still think it would be best if you typed it. But we can get, yeah, I think type your question if you can, please. Okay, let's talk about this presentation and then deliver one. All right. The presentation is 5 minutes long and you get 3 minutes to prepare for it. But the way you want to structure it has these 8 parts. And I should say again, this is, there are 1,000 ways to skin a cat, as the expression goes. So this is not necessary. You don't need to do this to win, all right? No judge has been told the team must have this exact format. It just turns out that this format has won like 3 of the 5, international finals. This structure does work, and it covers all the bases of the things you generally have to do when you're doing good philosophy. So you don't have to do it this way. This is a very good way to do it. Let me teach you it. There are 5 points that you get in the Olympiad for polite discourse. This is really a critical component of the whole thing. This is not debating. I don't know how many of you are debaters. Mars is a debater. I think Oriana's a debater, almost certainly. Zach and I, both debaters. All right, it's true. But there is a big difference in the tone of an Olympiad compared to a debate. I mean, at least in the style of debate that I did in high school, it wouldn't have been unreasonable to stand up and say, as aggressively as this, like, Judge, in this debate, the opponents have completely failed to explain their side of the topic, and they misunderstand every single thing we've said. That's why they're going to lose today. Like, that wouldn't be crazy, making the other team cry. It happens in debating. It's bad, but it happens. This style of competition is very relaxed, very polite. It more resembles a philosophy seminar room at a university. So even if you radically disagree with someone's position, you're going to phrase it in a very polite, calm way. You're going to say something like, oh, like that was a really interesting point. I like the way you explained that. Could you just clarify, like, what would you say if someone objected by blah, 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 and then like phrasing your objection almost as a hypothetical. So that tone of being very calm in your discourse should permeate the entire competition, which is why the very first thing you do is thank everyone in the room. So you just say, thank you so much, Team B and Judge, for joining us for this really interesting ethical discussion. Okay, let's get into our case. Right? It's very quick, very easy. It's going to get you those 5 marks for polite discourse. Next, it could be the case, depending on how complex the topic is, that you need to clarify or define some key terms. This isn't always necessary. I don't think that Oriana and I are going to do it today. I think that the topic is pretty well established, but we might, let's see. But if you think that you need to clarify or define some key term, you do that at the beginning. Okay. Or if you want to like restrict the topic that you're discussing, particularly to a particular type, like a subset of the overall topic, maybe that's where you do it. Okay, now we get into the critical component that you must have. This is true for a lot of things in school, like in essay writing, right? You need to have a thesis. And a thesis in this case is just where you state the question that you've been given and your answer to the question in the most direct, simple way possible. So is it good to have robot relationships? No, right? That's what we want to hear. A very straightforward thesis that's going to be the framework for the rest of your case and your presentation. Okay? Very simple. Nothing I've said so far is complicated. The next thing I'm going to say does get a little bit more complicated, okay? What you need to do after you've stated your basic thesis is you need to tell us what ethical perspective you're taking on the case, which really means which ethical theory are you going to be utilizing as the basis for your argumentation. So you should reflect to yourself, have I ever heard the term ethical theory? And if the answer is no, then I would say there is some Googling to do, and there's some like looking at videos. You can come to our resource page, you can get training, right? There's a lot you can do to learn this stuff, but there are a few discrete terms and how they apply that you really do want to get your head around, because they're sort of going to be talked about, right? Whether you like it or not. And for a middle school or a junior Olympiad, it's not necessarily true, but for a senior Olympiad, yes, they will be discussed. So I'll tell you just a couple of them. We're not doing a lecture on ethical theory today, but one of the most famous ethical theories that you probably have heard of is this idea, utilitarianism, okay? Utilitarianism. This is a branch of an ethical theory that really is saying an action is good or right if it maximizes happiness. If the result, the consequences of your action are overall cause net positivity, increased happiness, or utility, that's what it's called in the theory, utility, but it really just means happiness, then that action was good. So if we're going to assess whether robot relationships are a good thing, then our ethical approach could be from the perspective of utilitarianism. So what we're trying to determine in order to answer the question properly, and what we're going to argue about, is whether or not having robot relationships increases happiness in the world. This is the most straightforward, basic way to approach most ethical cases. And most ethical questions do have this component of like, is the consequence a good or a bad thing? So this is a very straightforward and normal way to approach an ethical question. And I think it's something we do in our everyday lives. Should I go and, like drop this bin bag off my top floor? Well, no, if I think about the consequences, it's probably a terrible idea. I don't know why that came to mind. I've never done that, I swear. Okay, so apart from utilitarianism, there's another classic approach to ethics. That is deontology. Okay, so these are the first two things you're going to Google if you've never heard any of this, and go look them up on YouTube. Deontology. This is the idea of having ethical principles that you kind of must not violate. And a lot of people tend to believe that these things sort of exist and are important in our ethical decision making. For instance, the idea of having a right to privacy. Some people would say that your right to privacy should be protected, even if violating it would have caused a better outcome in terms of utility. So there are sometimes these deontological principles that limit utility maximization. I know these are big words. You can get your head around this. If you've never heard about it, don't worry. You are going to be totally fine. Okay. You've presented your ethical theory now. You've picked like one major kind of approach about whether you're going to focus on the consequences or you're going to focus on rights and responsibilities. Maybe you're going to focus on virtue ethics, a third theory, right? So you've set that up. Now you're going to get into your arguments. And this is actually the bulk of your presentation, is going to be presenting these arguments. And the arguments are essentially, they're directly related to whatever your theory was and your thesis is. So if your theory is utilitarianism and your answer is this thing is bad, then by necessity, your argument section is going to be why this thing is bad. Here are the 3 ways that this thing is really bad. Robot love is going to destroy our society in these 3 ways, right? Or however many ways. So that's the argument section. All right. And if your theory is about some deontological principle, like the right to privacy, for instance, or the right to autonomy or bodily autonomy, then you argue, and then you're saying that robot love is like a good thing, then you get to argue why having these robots increase people's autonomy and their freedom, and therefore that's a good thing. Okay, so the arguments directly relate to the thesis and the theory. After that, we get to a super weird part, which is that you should have a counter argument to your own position. So a counter argument to your own position means you are literally going to present an argument against your own position. Okay, this argument, this counter argument should be extremely strong. It should be a good counter argument. It should be powerful, and it should be the best counter argument you can think of. Because if you can't defend your own position against the best possible counter argument, then why do you hold that position in the first place, right? After that, you're going to discharge the counter argument. So yeah, you want to raise a strong counter argument, but you don't want to defeat your own case. So you do have to then say, okay, like while that argument is strong, we discharge it in such and such kind of way. Okay. And then you do a conclusion and you just state what you've argued. So we've argued that robot love is a really good thing. Thank you so much for this. All right. That was a pretty rapid fire approach to this. There are other videos online that we've published and other examples of this. And like we can help you with training, anything you need if this feels like too much. But I think once you see us demonstrate this, which we're going to do right now, you won't be so afraid and everything's going to be totally fine. You're going to see how this really sounds. Let's get directly into it. Here we go. Our topic is robot love. I'm going to read this very quickly, so pay close attention, but we need to get through it. So in July 2023, chatbot startup Replica announced a spin-off service called Blush, designed for users interested in romantic relationships with chatbots. With the app, users can converse with thousands of different customizable personas of an AI chatbot, each with their own backstory and way of dating. The chatbot combines scripted dialogue with a large language model, an LLM, a model trained on a large data set of writing to enable it to engage in conversation as if it were a human. Unlike many other chatbots, Blush allows its bots to engage in emotionally weighty and sexually explicit topics. With fewer and fewer young people dating and corresponding increase in loneliness, proponents of romantic chatbots have pointed out that technology like Blush could be a powerful tool against the epidemic of loneliness. Many Replica and Blush users agree, saying the chatbot has given them a sense of emotional and sexual fulfillment that felt unattainable in the real world. Moreover, Replica CEO and founder Eugenia Cuda maintains that romantic relationships with AI can be a great stepping stone for actual romantic relationships, human relationships. On the other hand, critics highlight that many users are choosing romantic chatbots over real-world relationships. They argue that romantic relationships with chatbots tailor-made for user satisfaction are missing important components of genuine love and human connection, even if they help reduce loneliness. For instance, unlike human beings, replica bots are designed to be agreeable and customizable to cater to their users' interests. We have 3 study questions. Okay, I'm going to actually leave them for you to read later when you get the case set. We already have a question we're going to discuss. Ariana and I are now going to set a 3-minute timer and prepare ourselves to give the presentation. So let me set my timer here. Stopwatch. Alrighty. Here is the question. Will robot relationships be a good thing for the world? Very straightforward. The most basic question we could ask. Will robot relationships be a good thing for the world? Ariana, what's your initial intuition?
Maybe it will be a good thing for the world. There's a lot of discussion about how people are getting lonelier these days, and it might be helpful. I also think that, honestly, anything that makes it easier for people to communicate would be beneficial for an individual. They can have more meaningful conversations. They can get exposed to, like, I guess they can interact with a greater number of people, or like, I guess, AI.
Nice. I'm happy to take that approach. So should we take a basic utilitarian, like consequentialist stance on this and ask, like, should that be our ethical theory?
That would be fun.
Okay, let's do that. We'll start with a thanks. We'll do I don't think we need to define any key terms, but our thesis will be it's a good thing. Okay, the theory is utilitarianism, and our arguments, as you just stated, are going to be things like people are getting lonely, right? People are getting lonely, and then this has all sorts of benefits.
Yeah, and we just think that more options are good.
Yeah, and like different strokes for different folks. Like different people are going to be into different things and have different needs. And for the people who can't develop a romantic relationship, it's probably okay. I think that's great. Do you want to give the argument section? In fact, yeah, can I give the first 3? You give the argument. Is that cool? And then we'll see what happens after that.
Okay. And then the counter argument.
I guess the most worrying thing about this might be The fact
people,
that it undermines human relationships, or
yeah, I think people might get a little bit dependent on it.
I've heard stories about this. Like there's something in Japan of people already sort of like guys who never get into a relationship and just get hooked on these like pretty pre-AI chatbots. So it's only going to be worse with these ones. Undermine human relationships. Okay, and then the response to that is the discharge is like probably it's only a small percentage of people who are going to suffer this, and it's pretty unlikely that they would have been able to have a successful relationship anyway. So probably it just makes the world better.
Yeah, probably. I also think that like people get bored after a while. Like you could probably add that we often socialize with a variety of different people. Maybe people don't like exactly only rely on chatbots. Like they can obviously, I think the vast majority of people would likely use like a robot and like have human friends.
Yeah, totally. I already use GPT for certain conversations that like if no one's around, like I'll have interactions with GPT that are fairly like human, really. Okay, do you want to do the argument and the counter argument? I'll do the first three and the last one. Does
Sure,
that work?
yeah, I can discuss the argument and the counter argument.
Awesome. That's 3 minutes. Let's get started with our 5 minute presentation. Okay. Time starts now. Thank you so much, Judge and Team B, for joining us for this really, really interesting ethical discussion. We're really excited to get into it. So let's get straight on to our thesis. The question in today's case is, will robot relationships be a good thing for the world? And we're going to argue in this case that they will be a good thing. Okay, moving on to our theory. The ethical theory we're going to use to justify our arguments is basically utilitarianism. This is simply the view that an action is right if and only if it maximizes utility. And by utility, basically all we mean is human happiness. It's just well-being and maybe just like positive mental states. We don't have a really specific view on this, but if it makes the world better and happier, then it will have been a good thing and we should be justified in doing it. Okay, let's go on to our arguments now, and we'll try to demonstrate why having robot relationships will make the world a better place. Ariana.
Okay, so there's a couple of parts of our argument. The first is just that robot relationships are generally a good thing because people are getting lonelier. Uh, Due to a variety of causes, such as the pandemic, there's also a lot of social anxiety involved and issues people need to work through. Talking to other people can be difficult. It's also just that some people have a harder time than others. We think that we can decrease this because just because you feel a little bit shy or you're experiencing loneliness doesn't mean you should be cut off from socialization. The point is, robot relationships are good because people who are lonely, and which is a very alarming number growing at a very fast rate, are able to access genuine conversations with robots. There's more options for them. We also think that in general, robot chatbots would have really good benefits. We think that, first of all, there are more options for people to interact with. We think that this is very beneficial. After all, individuals often need some sort of socialization. You don't always talk to the same people. And at the same time, you can talk to your different friends about a variety of different topics. We think the same applies for a chatbot. That is simply one more friend that you can talk to. It is one more person you can build a very close relationship with. We think that as long as we are able to maximize these choices, that is good because we can also increase the likelihood that someone is able to have a very good conversation and feel very good about it afterwards. We also think that the level of personalization that chatbots can bring is very good for people. You are able to talk to someone who is aware of your feelings and can often acknowledge certain sensitivities that sometimes humans miss out on. So for all of these reasons, we think that robots would be much beneficial on an emotional level and to provide more options to make sure that people are less lonely and can make more connections. Now, there are counter arguments and some very valid concerns about whether or not robot chatbots could possibly be harmful. Notably, a counter argument that is brought up is that this undermines human relationships. That is because the more robots you have, the less need there is for people. And if we interact with people less, or if we normalize robots too much, this kind of takes away from the importance of human relationships. But I will let Archie address as to why this is not something to be extremely concerned about.
Okay, thank you so much, Ariana. So now I'll try to discharge that counter argument about the risks to humanity. So I think that there are some worries about AI for sure. But in general, this idea that we're going to have a huge shift away from human relationships, I think doesn't really reflect reality. I think human beings are very naturally guided towards human relationships. Just by our pure biology, the way our brains are set up, we are going to always want to love humans. However, there's like a subset of people who can't form those relationships for various different reasons, be they physical, emotional, psychological, mental. People with like difficult lives, particularly, they're the ones who end up not being able to find human relationships. So it's for them who this is so beneficial. And then for the rest of society, who maybe are like more functional in this regard, I think that they can have a pretty healthy relationship with these romantic or non-romantic relationship partners in chatbots. So like, I don't think it's unreasonable even for me sometimes to open up GPT and, given how good the voice mode has gotten, like have discussions about economics with it. That's like a type of sort of student-teacher relationship that you can develop. Like the romantic element isn't the only part of this that you could possibly have. So I think the idea that this is going to undermine human society to a high degree is quite unlikely and not a huge risk. And actually, the rewards for the people who otherwise suffer so much as a result of loneliness outweighs any of those potential risks. So we have argued here that we think relationships with robots is going to be overall a good thing for our society. Thank you so much. And Team B, we're looking forward to your commentary. Okay, so we got a great question in chat. I'm going to address that. Then I'm going to tell you how to do the commentary. And then Zach is going to I think actually, Zach, maybe you just go straight into the commentary. Is that cool? I know we discussed something slightly different before, but I think time-wise, that's going to be our best bet. Okay, so we got a question in the chat that is from an anonymous attendee that says, is the question supposed to be specific to the case or more general? Isn't there a difference between robot relationships in general versus in a romantic context that should be argued differently? Brilliant. Such a good comment. Such a good, conceptualization of this whole thing. I sort of addressed that at the end, partly because I saw your question, okay, which is sort of cheating. I wouldn't normally in a real round. This is precisely the thing that if you saw us doing this in the thing, in your team B, you should raise this. This is your first question. Absolutely. Don't you think it's interestingly different depending on how you approach the idea of a relationship, and you could have had a more broad discussion, blah, blah, blah. Perfect. As to whether you're right or wrong about that, I mean, look, it's good philosophy, which means it's like open-ended and your comment is totally valid. Okay. Great. And I'm going to answer that other question later. It's a bit more pragmatic. So now let's talk briefly about the commentary. The commentary section is the 3 minutes Team B gets to ask Team A questions. First thing, it's not rebuttal. You don't need to disagree. There are many things you can do, though. First, you're going to thank Team A. Zach is going to thank us profusely. I'm not doing that for my own benefit. I'm doing that for his. He will get more points that way. Second, he's going to make sure that he summarizes the point that we made before he responds to it. Okay? So he's going to briefly say, you made this point about such and such a thing. Now I'd like to respond to it, or have you considered? And then he gives a response. This ensures that he is being responsive to something we said in our presentation and not making the big mistake of just presenting his own ideas and just saying, well, what I think is blah, blah, blah. That's not the point. That's not commentary. That's just another case. We want commentary. Now, here are the things that he can do in his commentary. One, he could point out if he thinks we have some kind of contradiction within our case. He could also, second, just ask for some clarifications. Like, you said this, but what exactly did you mean? Did you mean this or this? What about this other case? Just ask for clarification about, or maybe we didn't have a counter argument. And he could say, what would be your, what do you think is the strongest counter argument to your own position? Blah, blah, blah. He could also just himself point out another counter argument. So he could say, look, I thought your point about the loneliness of people is really significant and interesting. Thank you for that. But I actually think I can raise another counter argument against that. Isn't it possible that, and then he's going to raise the counter argument. He's not taking it on as his own perspective and attacking our position. He's raising it as a hypothetical counter argument to help Team A with their position, which is really the goal of Team B. Or, and this is interesting, he could strengthen one of our points. He could actually say oh, that was really good. I love that point. Here's another example to actually support your position. That would be really cool as well. So the common mistakes people make here. One, just making a presentation without actually responding to what Team A said. That's a big mistake, and people do it all the time. And two is just agreeing with Team A without actually providing reasons. So sometimes we see beginner teams get up and go, oh, wow, Team A, that was amazing. We loved it. Wow, wow, wow. Round of applause. Good job. And then they sit down. And it's like, okay, that's not quite good enough either. You do have to contribute something to the round, philosophically speaking. You have to like press Team A in some direction to have, you know, like ideas clash and then come out with hopefully something better at the end of it. Okay, with that said, I'm going to let Zach give his commentary, and I'm going to flow, as in note take, Zach's commentary on my screen, so Oriana and I are ready to respond to it. Alrighty, Zach.
All right, I'll time myself, and that time will start now. First off, I'd like to thank Team A so much for their fascinating presentation. Lots of interesting arguments there for me to address. It was tough to narrow it down to just 3 points, but I think there are 3 things I'd like to talk about. In this speech, in this commentary, I'm going to address their argument about loneliness. I'll talk a little bit about the counterargument they raised, and then I'll raise another potential counterargument. So starting off with their argument about loneliness. Team A concluded from a utilitarian point of view that AI, romantic and otherwise relationships will be good, largely because of a current epidemic of loneliness that they may address. So right now we have lots of loneliness, we have lots of anxiety, and their idea is that maybe these AI relationships will be solvent for that and will really sort of help people deal with that. I think this might be plausible, but one thing we have to consider is that this epidemic of loneliness is largely caused by technology and caused by the replacement of real human interaction with technological substitutes. So it strikes us that this is, you know, their argument is very similar to one you could have made in the early aughts about smartphones or in the 2010s about social media. You could have said, people are lonely. This gives people new ways to connect. That's going to be amazing. That's going to make people happy. But what happened was just the opposite. What we've learned is that these technological substitutes are actually very poor substitutes, and they actually make people lonelier. So this is one thing that I think Team A should consider. Their counterargument, moving on to our second point in this commentary, their counterargument was about a risk that these AI relationships would undermine human relationships. And they discharged this fear by saying that it's only a small percentage of people who this risk would apply to, and it's mostly those who would. Did I cut out for a second there? Okay. Everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. We think that this is a realistic concern, something we should be worried about. But we think, or this is a realistic response, but we don't think this does enough credit to the fact that there probably are some people at the margins. So there probably are some people who right now find it pretty difficult to get human relationships, especially romantic ones. But it's the only way to get to a lot of things they really want out of life. Romantic fulfillment, maybe marriage. So they have very strong incentives to go out into the real world, try hard, do things that are scary, like ask people on dates, and they're motivated and they go do that. And then eventually they end up in these relationships. For these people, there surely is a worry that AI relationships will totally replace whatever incentive would in the status quo, in the normal counterfactual, get them to go do that hard work. And they may just end up with no relationships at all. The final point I'd like to make very quickly is another potential counterargument. Their counterargument, the counterargument of Team A, was based on the idea of AI relationships being pretty good, but not a real substitute. I think there's another fear, which is that they're so good that they're even better than real human relationships. They just get perfect. They get addictive. You have this like perfect partner that listens to you, that cares about you, that's better in every possible way. And this might make people happy, but we think then you also have to consider the second order effects. What does a world look like if 95% of romantic relationships are human to AI? People aren't forming families. People aren't having real relationships in the world. People stop interacting with each other wholesale. Again, great presentation by Team A. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say in your response.
Okay, we now have 1 minute to give our response. I think the response section, there's not that much like lecturing I need to give to you about this, really. I mean, we're obviously going to thank, as always, and we have a lot to thank for with Zach there. That was obviously really good. And then we're going to do a bit of flagging. So we're going to try to say like, look, we said this, you responded like this, and now we're going to respond to you. And the way we respond to Zach can be a plethora of things. We could agree with him. We might try to justify our initial position. We could do anything we want with Zach's presentation, as you're about to hear. Okay, Ariana, we have 1 minute. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, time starts now. Okay, all of his points are really good. That we have to take them all seriously. Do you have a specific response to any of them that you'd like to give?
I think people still talk to people. I think human probably evolution still requires organisms to interact with each other. Like this is going to take a million years for a really scary paradigm to shift. So I think we can just take on the third response very quickly with that. Um, in terms of the loneliness issue, I think the issue with loneliness is uniquely, we should point out that the problem in the status quo is that people have no outlet of communication whatsoever. I think AI or chatbots are the ones that provide some sort of communication. The problem is in the status quo, people don't feel comfortable talking to others or there's no one to talk to. This is the better alternative than like leaving people like hanging.
Oh, can I try to do that one to draw a disanalogy between the two things?
Of course.
The phone one? Okay, and then the second one, we have 4 seconds. I'll have a go, and then you can jump in if I don't get it. Okay, here we go. That's time. Okay. Thank you so much, Zach, for that wonderful commentary. There's so much to get into there. I think we should go straight for it. Okay, so this first point. We talked about the idea that these chatbots are important because there's an epidemic of loneliness. And you make the really interesting comment that what if it's the case that this loneliness is actually caused by technology? I think, and you gave the great example of like, couldn't we have made this argument in like 2001 when smartphones are coming out and we would have thought, or social media, Facebook might be another great example of this. It's connecting people. Turns out it actually makes people more anxious, depressed, and lonely. Probably. Like that seems to be the best evidence. We agree. I think that the response we have to give here is that AI is actually, and this might fall into the trap of your third response, but I think AI is different and it is better. I think it is so much more human and responsive and interactive and can be trained and modeled in such unique ways that it's not like the base algorithms of Facebook that are just like pumping you with like emotional content that might make you angry. Like, no, it actually will be designed to give you a fulfilling conversation and experience and relationship and life. So still for those people who suffer the problems of loneliness, this might actually bring about a significant change. And I kind of like the idea that you can learn from these chatbots, if they're trained properly, how to interact with actual people. And because they're so accurate, that it might give you the tools to go out and interact with people, whereas playing video games or these other technologies never really gave you the capacity to do that. So I like to think that there are some differences here that might make it worth it from a utilitarian perspective. Okay, on the second point, we had a counter argument. We said, what if it undermines human relationships? And then we said, but probably this is a small number of people. You respond, but aren't there these people like on the margin who they will, otherwise they would have found a relationship, but it would have taken a lot of work and now they won't? I think we have to admit that there are some of those people. Of course, like there are people on all sorts of margins. I guess from our perspective, the number of people who are just like fall into that category of totally lonely, never going to make their way out, those people are probably suffering more and will be benefited overall on net more if we give them the capacity to have some kind of relationship. And those people on the margins, even if it shifts it by 1%, hopefully won't be the biggest problem. Oriana, to respond to the third point.
All right, so the third point that we said to our counter argument was that this likely does not become a real substitute. There's still going to be human relationships. Zach comes up with a really good response, and that is, well, if this is so good, then people would just use AI and give up on finding human relationships in the first place. I think our response to this is just very simple. Human relationships take place and organisms interact with each other because it's evolutionary and biologically favorable for them to do so. This paradigm shift doesn't just occur in one generation. It will take millions upon millions of years for humans to fully abandon each other. That's to say, we're biologically driven to still want to interact with humans. AI is just another option for human communication. Thank you, Zach, for helping us improve our case, and we look forward to judges' questions.
Great. Awesome. Brilliant. So someone points out in chat correctly, or in the question Q&A, they say, wait, aren't there meant to be more than one person? Oh, we have a few Q&As, let's do them. So someone says, isn't it meant to be we have more than one person on a team, right? And you're absolutely right. You can't compete solo. Zach would be ousted from the competition if this were a real event. Thankfully, this is just a demonstration. But yeah, you're right. He should be in a team of 3 to 5 as well. Thank you so much. Okay. And finally, anonymous attendee number 63 asks, will you be allowed to read off of something during a presentation? So yes, we don't have to. It's a complicated answer. We don't like making rules that can't be enforced. And we can't enforce the rule for you in our competitions that you have no notes. So we don't say that. You can bring notes. However, because of that, we scale our questions a little bit harder. Okay. And that means that we try to give questions that you won't be able to have written responses for. Because what we don't want is someone going, and then this happened, and this, and then second response, third response. It's not good philosophy. We want you thinking on your feet. So I would say the best thing you can do is have some version of notes, but you don't want to ever just read them. You want to have them as dot points. You want to have general ideas that you might be able to apply to different questions. You need to ensure that you're answering the actual question at hand and not the one that you pre-prepared. And I would recommend not just reading. That's like not going to get you to the finish line, basically, or you're not going to win the competition like that. Okay. Are you allowed to take notes physically and online? Yes. You can have a Google Doc with your team. Totally fine. I will add, if you get, and we'll tell you this if you're in this position, but if you win this competition in a school-based team and you go to the international final, that is strictly no notes. Okay. And again, I still don't think it can be fully enforced, but that's the rule. So you're going to follow it. So just for that specific competition, absolutely no notes. Yeah. And don't even try. Okay. On to judges' questions. I'll talk about this a little bit. It'll be funny though, if I can't do well under the pressure of Mars's questions, because I'm a little worried about that. But in judges' questions, you could get people asking really tough stuff that you don't know how to respond to. Here are some strategies. Number 1, don't immediately respond. So, and this is actually really important. In a round, you are going to have no ability to go into a breakout room. So just like this, right? I would have to have a back channel of communication with Oriana. So we would have a call going, we might have a Discord chat going in the side, or we'd be in the same room. Obviously, if you're at the same school and you want to go together, like that's great as well. But you need some way of communicating with each other, not on the main Zoom. Because for this 30-second period and for all of your interim periods, right, your discussion periods before your presentations and your commentary, you want to talk to each other. And that's true here as well. So you need to have that back channel. We don't have that. We'll do it in front of you. So take 30 seconds, discuss. Don't just jump into a response if you don't know what to say. And then also, these are almost all, Zach, you can correct me, but almost all like master's or PhD students who we have judging at our competition. That means that they are all brilliant at philosophy. And that means that if they choose to, they will be able to ask you questions that press you to your limits, of your arguments. They'll be really, really good. And if that's the case, you don't have to sort of fight them on it. You can just be like, wow, that is a really good point. We actually don't know exactly how to respond to that. Can you ask that question in a slightly different way that like we'll be better able to understand? Or even, Judge, we don't know how to respond to that. Like, how would you respond to that? Like, can you give us a hint about what we should do? My point is that the judge's question is not a point where you're arguing with the judge. It's a point where you're having a philosophical discussion with a brilliant philosopher. And that means if you get stumped, you admit that you're stumped, and it's totally fine. That's why you don't need to be afraid or worried about this section of the competition or the event. One last question, is there a set prep time? E.g., we have 3 minutes of prep time that we should delegate to talk to our teammates throughout the round. So if you look at the outline here, take a screenshot of this. It's on our website, modusponensinstitute.com, or you just look up Ethics Olympiad and you'll find us, Pan American Ethics Olympiad, you'll find it. Go to resources, you'll see this. This has the flow of everything with all of the conference times. Okay, judges' questions. Let's do 7 minutes. Here we go.
Great.
When you're ready, Mats.
All right, thank you for your excellent presentations. I have a couple of questions. The first is on your theory. I think the choice of utilitarianism was a good one. I am curious if we could make that more specific. So, two kinds of utilitarianism would be one is maximizing the average utility of the people that exist now. Another would be maximizing the total utility of humans that exist now and into the future, where the number of people in the future would contribute positively to that. Which one is closer to what your team had in mind, and what would the implication be for your case?
I think I've got a response for this, Ariana. So I might jump in. Okay, thank you so much, Mars. Really, really good distinction, and an important one that perhaps we should have addressed in our initial presentation. I think we don't have any principled reason to rule out future life in our utility calculus. I think we are concerned about them as well. And the implication, but I don't think, I mean, we never discussed that actually in our plans for this, but I think that that works for us. And the reason is that the reason this would impact our presentation is if you could demonstrate one of the points that Zach made, which is that this would actually cause potentially the wipeout of humanity because we no longer wanted to procreate, because we just wanted to end our lives like interacting with these beautiful, perfect, romantic robots. If that were the case, then that would undermine the capacity for future life. And that would be a really big problem for us. And I think we would just admit that that would be probably a problem for us. I don't think we would love the idea of a world without humans and where only the robots remain. I think that there is value in future life and continuing that. So if you could demonstrate that point, it would be a problem. I don't think you can demonstrate that. I think it's highly unlikely, as Ariana said in her response, that eventuality would take place, which is why we're not too concerned about it.
Very thoughtful. The next thing I want to ask about is a policy implication or a possible additional thought on top of just, do these relationships exist? So a lot of critics of technology have noted that digital assistants like Siri, Cortana, Alexa are overwhelmingly female, and how that might set bad norms when they are always subservient. Do you think there should be restrictions on how deferent or compliant these digital relationship partners can become?
Well, can we have 30 seconds to discuss that before we answer?
Absolutely.
Thanks. We'll have to do that in here out loud. Ariana, what do you think about that? Do you have a take?
I think that's very difficult. I know a lot of things just let you set your own preferences, and it's kind of a weird restriction to place upon people. Like there's some people who just maybe like the sound of one voice better than another. And like it's very difficult to place hard limits on what your chatbot can actually do.
I mean, but imagine we could change the models and we could be like, look, if it's a woman chatbot, it can't be like 100% deferential because this sets bad precedent for real human interactions. Should we do that?
I'm kind of like against that. I find that idea very uncomfortable, saying that like we're just going to assign different roles to like different people, like different perceptions of what society might think of someone.
Okay, do you want to try and respond to this?
I can try to take a crack at it.
Nice. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Generally speaking, on a very broad level, we think that it would not be in the best interest of society to set very hard limits on what your chatbot can actually do. We think first and foremost, a chatbot is trained off of a lot of data, and we think that that data is in general very helpful to enhance user experiences. And we think only can a chatbot improve and use a lot of the data and build to its fullest potential, can the chatbot actually get better and eventually decreasing the amount of bias that occurs or harmful attitudes. I would also say that the more we try to regulate what chatbots can do, and specifically if we're trying to target a harmful image, for example, of certain chatbot voices based on gender stereotypes, I think we exacerbate and bring unnecessary attention to the issue. I think subconsciously most people don't think about chatbots like this, and we don't want to like introduce this issue as another way of thinking about it if this problem doesn't exist as prominently in the status quo.
I appreciate the very clear stance. One last question. This concerns your argumentation. So back and forth throughout the argument, comment, and response is the degree to which this will lead to people not having human communication anymore. You gave arguments about how we're evolutionarily coded to see human behavior, but simultaneously argue that these robots could get rid of loneliness. What is your evidence or reasoning that these robots will thread the needle where they are satisfying our need to not be lonely, but not satisfying our other social needs?
Okay, we'll need 30 seconds to discuss that one. I mean, he's totally right. There is a bit of a problem there, isn't there?
Yeah.
I mean, because are they going to be that good? I mean, I think as a matter of fact, they will be that good. I just think like they won't. Maybe there's like for a lot of people, like getting most of a human relationship is better than having none. But also the reason it threads the line is that the biological drive to procreate is too strong. But that's not true for everyone anyway. But
I think this conversation also splits into different groups of people. I think
Yeah,
a lot
exactly.
of people are very uncomfortable with too much technology in the first place. So we can say that we can try to break this down into groups. I think we can also say that two things can be two things can be true at the same time. Humans as a general species do have a biological drive to procreate. Cooperation and interaction does help progress the human species and has helped survival for a long time. And we can also say that there are some outliers, and that even if it's just an outlier, or even if we do believe that loneliness is going to be solved, this is a very short-term issue, and we think that this short-term solution is still good for the long term.
Ariana, we've run out of time. Thank God. Thank God we don't have to answer that. Okay. We're so sorry, Judge. We just ran out of time. We just got to the end of our discussion, and we're really sorry we can't answer that question. It was brilliant.
Absolutely fine. Thank you for the presentation, and I hope you'll continue pondering the question.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Oh, wow. Cool. That was exciting. It's rare that I get to do like an entire round under competition circumstances. Not quite that, but wow, how exciting. Thank you so much, Mars. Thank you so much, Ariana, for your contributions. That was just unbelievable. It's going to be, I think super valuable to everyone watching to have heard you guys do that. So massive thanks. And Zach, of course, but we both run this together. So we're both thanking them. I'm thanking them collectively on behalf of us. Guys, that basically brings us to the end of the day. There's one more question in the chat that I want to respond to. That is from the anonymous attendee who says, are we going to be in just one room for the entire day? I'll try to I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, but basically you're going to come in, big Zoom room, 120 people in there. Then the Zoom rooms are going to open, the breakout rooms, right? And then you're going to go into the breakout room, and then you're in the breakout room with team A, team B, and the judge. You do one whole round there, like all the way through what we did, and then you flip sides and then do it again. And then at the end of that round, you all go back into the main room, and then you get your next, or you get a little break, and then you get your next room assignments with another team, a different team, and a different judge. And you go there and you do the same thing. You do that 4 times, and then the day is over. Is it online? Yes. It's hard to get put into Zoom breakout rooms in person. Yes, it is online, meaning you can participate from anywhere. Cool. That was another question we just got. So I think Zach and I will sit around here for a few more minutes, or I definitely will. Oriana and Mars, you guys are free to go. Thank you so much again for coming. If anyone else has any questions, just put them in the chat. Or in fact, like, I'm happy to open the floor to people just asking questions in general. If you want to put up your hand and verbally respond, I think we can achieve that as well. And I'll just wait until the room is clear and everyone has gone home. And if you have questions, I'll be here for as long as you like. Thank you so much, guys. Ciao for now.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mars and Oriana.
Thank you. Have
Bye.
a